Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Hey, welcome to another episode of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I get to simplify the marketing and the mindset so you, the chiropractor, can increase your income, your impact, and your enjoyment in practice too. Today, we're diving into a topic that I think will resonate for many of you. We're going to be talking all about reactivating patients who've dropped out of care. You see, every patient that comes to see us is on a journey. They come to us with aches and pains. They want to feel and function better for them and their family. That sometimes, despite our absolute best efforts, they disappear from our practices. In fact, not sometimes, often they disappear from our practice too. Now, perhaps it is they didn't quite get the results they wanted, or maybe they got the results they wanted, but they didn't want to continue with ongoing care, or maybe they just simply got really busy, lost track of their time, and they got sort of stuck in the hustle and bustle of life. In today's episode, we're going to tackle each of these issues head on. We're going to explore some really practical, action-orientated strategies. How do we reach out to these patients and help them kind of reconnect with the value that chiropractic can bring to their lives also? If you've ever found yourself kind of puzzling over how to reactivate patients who've left your practice, then this episode is absolutely for you as well. Now, there are several reasons why I think having really good systems in around reactivation and in terms of retention, several reasons why this makes sense, but let me share just 5 of them as well, okay? The first is just flat out from a cost-effective point of view there. Acquiring new patients often cost significantly more than retaining an existing one as well. Acquiring a new patient often involves kind of advertising, marketing, consultations. Reactivating a patient, as you'll see, although it takes some time, maybe of the front desk staff, maybe of yours as well, often it's a lot less than what the costs are associated with getting a new patient as well. Number 2 is got to do with the familiarity of service as well, okay? When we reactivate a new patient, because they're aware of how our practice runs and works, they require a whole lot less introductory information to get them immediately integrated back into the practice. There's not, longer visits, initial consultation, report of findings, workshops, all those type of things there too. They can really often very quickly and seamlessly integrate back into the practice. It's really good for your revenue stability. The ups and downs that come along with new patients can be ironed out much more flatly if we have good reactivation and good retention process as well. I really love number 4, the data-driven information that you can get from having a really good reactivation and retention process. You'll be able to understand why it is that people left in the first place, and then we can learn from this as well, and then we can apply this across the rest of our practice. And this means everybody benefits from it also. And then 5th here, and I think probably most important benefit for having really good reactivation process is just continuity of care. From a health perspective, continuity of care is just much better for the patient. It allows for consistent long-term care plans, and this is going to lead to better health outcomes. And we don't talk about this enough when it comes to retention and reactivation. We spend a lot of time talking about how it helps the bottom line of the practice, which is great. Okay, we're allowed to have a good bottom line in our practice. But the fact of the matter is, a practice member comes into us, they have a problem, we lay out a plan for them. They've got a much better chance of achieving the results they want if they follow through with that plan. This is really important, certainly, that we educate and get our entire team on to understand that retention and reactivation is first and foremost an issue about continuity of care. So speaking about kind of team members on there as well, reactivation begins with creating a culture of reactivation. It's about engaging the entire team. This is not something that should be done by just the CAs or just the doctors. It needs to be an entire team effort that creates really good retention and reactivation. Now, this means, again, I'm going to air some dirty laundry here as well. In the early days for me, we did not have a culture of reactivation because ours wasn't a place where patients were happy and wanting to return. We were very rigid in the structure that we had with our practice. It was a very much my way or the highway. We had a really strong subluxation, family-based wellness care, get checked once a week or don't get checked at all. Now, this is the way that you practice now and you're happy with that. Then again, there's no judgment, but I wasn't practicing how it was true to my heart there as well. And what I was doing is I was making people really wrong about it too. I'm almost embarrassed about lots of the ways that I look back on it. Now, I had a couple of situations here that really helped to were really very enlightening for me. So very often somebody would get to a progress exam, or a family would get to a progress exam. They'd say, look, Angus, we really love chiropractic, but we'd like to get checked once a fortnight or maybe once a month. And I would say to them, that's fine. It's just not what we do here. In fact, I didn't even say that's fine. I would just let them know, look, we're once a week for the rest of your life here. And as a result, what I would do is I was referring a lot of these families to another chiropractor who just started up around the corner from me in the next suburb there too. And so imagine it, if a family said to you, hey, listen, we love this, but can we get checked once every fortnight or once a month? So I was sending lots of families to this lovely guy around the corner, and he loved me for it. I built his practice, and I would see him multiple times a year. And he was doing lots of other great things too. It wasn't just me. But I would see him multiple times a year, and he would often thank me for all these great referrals that I would send him. So that had me kind of raising my eyebrows a little. But at the same time, the second aha or enlightening moment came to me with my accountant. So as each tax year would come around here in Australia, June 30, I would pitch up at David completely unprepared. My receipts would be a nightmare. I hadn't followed through on any of the things that he'd asked me to do beforehand, and it was a nightmare. It used to take us 3 or 4 months to get things back on track again. And then I would invariably say to David, this year I'm going to be different. We're going to have quarterly meetings, and I'll be on top of that. I'll keep all of my receipts. But again, year after year, and I did this for a number of years, perhaps 6 or 8 years, I would do this. And I had a realization along with that I was the worst type of patient, certainly a worst type of accounting client as well. And that what David was with me each and every time with this is he was very caring and compassionate and supportive. I was just kicking my patients out that didn't want to do things my way. I was just kicking them out. And I realized that I could do things differently. And I wanted to show up much more how David was showing up with me, because eventually I got on top of these things. Now I'm great with this stuff now. I'm fantastic with my receipts. I'm fantastic with my accounting. I'm on top of it. I always have money saved away there too. And David was a big part of what helped me to learn that process. Around that time, I started the culture or the mantra that I started to develop. Again, I don't know whether I heard of this from someone else or I invented it there too. Either way, I'm sure I just borrowed it from somebody else. I started the culture and the mission for us is that when you came into my practice, I wanted you to be, I thought of myself as your chiropractor for life. And I realized that sometimes you'd be active under care and sometimes you'd be inactive under care there too. But regardless, I wanted to be your chiropractor, and I wanted our practice to be your chiropractic practice for life. Now again, this obviously, we had many patients that didn't continue with us forever. They moved out of town or they stopped. But this idea took a lot of pressure off me. It didn't mean, I started to realize also around this time there too, that there were several things that I knew that I could be doing for my health that I wasn't doing. Sometimes my exercise wasn't great. Sometimes my eating wasn't great. Sometimes my sleeping wasn't great. Sometimes my mental health practices weren't great. But whenever they were up and down, depending on what was going on there too, I wanted somebody who could support and guide me back there, not somebody that would be judgmental of me. And that's how I was for my patients. If they weren't using chiropractic the way I wanted them to use it, I was super judgmental. And so I started to create this culture inside our practice. We wanted an environment that was really open for patients to return, where they wouldn't feel judged, where they wouldn't feel like I was the angry school teacher or the angry parent. And I began to realize over the coming years that there were 3 reasons why people did drop out of care. Of course, they still dropped out of care. It still happens regardless of how great you are. I'm not yet to meet any chiropractor that doesn't have patients drop out. But there are 3 reasons. And here's the 3 reasons. I touched on these in the introduction there of this podcast. First is they're not happy with the results they're getting. Second is they're happy with the results they're getting, or they've got the outcome they've wanted. They just don't want to continue on with chiropractic care. And the third reason is they get busy and distracted. Now, what I realized as the years went on, as the more of a culture that we created, the better we got with our education, the better we got at building relationships, is the number one reason why people needed to be reactivated is they just got busy and distracted. It wasn't that they weren't liking what we're doing. It wasn't they weren't happy. It wasn't they didn't have money, those kinds of things. They just got busy and distracted. Think about it, okay? This is probably the case for your practice too, if you've created that lovely environment of reactivation. So then we began to start to realize that what we wanted to do is we needed to get proactive with our reactivations. How do we start to educate people about those 3 things that might get in the way of them getting their results? How do we talk to them about symptoms? How do we talk to them about being busy? How do we keep them on track with that? And this would really begin for us. Again, we had a culture of this, but a lot of this was done in the report of findings is where the foundation was done. And then again, in our daily interactions through our adjustments. I want to talk a little bit here about some of the key things that we would do in our report of findings, both the conversations I would have with the patients and then what would go on at the report of findings checkout from our CAs. So first of all, in the report of findings, it became really important that I wasn't forcing anybody into care, particularly into long-term care, and that I was giving them real choices. In the early days, I thought like I was giving them choices, but I wasn't really. I was forcing them into an area. And if I was forcing somebody to, or coercing or manipulating somebody to get chiropractic care, then it was no wonder that they were going to drop out. and they weren't going to reactivate because they started for the wrong reasons. They started for my reasons, not for theirs. And so in the report of findings, I would start off by letting them know there are 3 things that we're going to go through today. I'm going to talk about what's causing your problem, how long it's going to take to correct it, and the costs involved. They're the only 3 things I covered. If your report of findings are taking much more than 10 or 15 minutes, you're probably covering a lot more than that. That's pretty much all anybody wants to know from their report of findings. But I needed to lay down a couple of important things in the how long it's going to take. And so when I got to that section, I would say something like this. I would say, John, when it comes to how long that's going to take to correct the migraine headaches, there's a couple of things you need to be aware of. The first one is actually dealing with the headaches themselves. This is going to take us, I think, somewhere between the next 6 to 10 weeks as well. The headaches are a bit like the smoke alarm, okay, that's going on there as well. Underneath the smoke alarm, the cause of the problem are those things that I just showed you before on your x-rays or scans or whatever I went in through there too. To get the underlying cause there correct, so not only turn off the smoke alarm, but put off the fire underneath that, I think that's going to take us somewhere closer between that 12 to 18 months as well. Now, most people, when they come and see us, not only want to get rid of their headaches or correct the symptoms, but they want to correct the underlying problem as well. We have some people that just want to deal with the symptoms. What makes sense for you, John? What are you after? And I would ask John that, and I would listen to him, and I would respectfully. Now, again, most people go, man, I want the whole shebang. Give it all to me. I go, great, fantastic. All right, so next 6 to 10 weeks, I hope those headaches will get under track when we would have that conversation there too. But I also wanted to have a little bit of accountability, because if John came back to me and said, yeah, look, at this stage here, all that's important to me is just to get rid of the symptoms. I wanted to acknowledge that and respect it, but I also needed to, there needs to be a level of accountability with that too. And I would often say something like this: not a problem, John. We have some patients that want with that too, and I'm excited to help you with your headaches. I want you to understand though, as we get rid of these headaches, that's not going to cause or make any changes to the things that we saw on the x-ray beforehand and the posture, and we're not unlikely to see the scans change. It also means that at some stage in the future, those headaches are likely to come back. Now, I don't know whether that's going to be next month or next year, but they're likely to come back. Are you okay with that, buddy? And I can do that in a respectful, compassionate way. And I just, yes. Now, in those circumstances, what I started to realize too is a lot of people who wanted to start off with symptomatic-based care is they very often considered and continued on with care afterwards because they got great results. They love chiropractic. They love coming into our practice. But at that stage, they were just testing the water to start with it too. So first and most important is that we stopped forcing people into care. We gave them real choices as well. And then what we wanted to do is that we started to bring up the 3 things that get in the way of them getting the results. Now, if you want to do a deeper dive into this with somebody that's a whole bunch more eloquent than me, I'm going to see if I can find this because I've got it written down here, 216. There we go. In episode 216 of the podcast, I've had a chat with Martin Harvey, where he takes you through a behavior change process that's called WHOOP. Now, WHOOP stands for wishes, outcomes, obstacles, and a plan. And Martin has a really nice way of bringing up the obstacles, okay, and then helping them create a plan. So go back and listen to that episode. But I'll show you, here's how we would do it as well. And I would have a conversation right at the very end when we got to things that might go like this. And I might go, John, just to finish things up, there are typically 3 things that get in the way of our patients getting best results there as well. I want to share those with you so that we can make sure we can prevent those if possible. The first is that sometimes the symptoms go away really early and they think the problem is corrected. But as I reminded you beforehand, the symptoms going is really a bit like the smoke alarm going off. Doesn't mean that the fire is out there too. We'll celebrate when that's the case there too. And I'll remind you that this is just part of the journey that's happening there too. The second thing is that can get in the way is that sometimes people can get a little frustrated that the symptoms don't go away straight away. As I mentioned before, it might take us the first 6 to 10 weeks to really get top of these headaches. And there might be some periods in there where the headaches are coming and going, and sometimes the headaches can even get worse to begin with. If you're feeling a little frustrated along the way, it's really important that you let me know. Obviously, I'm going to be checking the progress of your spine each and every time, and I'll be reporting to you how things are moving forwards. But if you're feeling a little frustrated with how things are going, please make sure you keep me in the loop with that too. Is that okay? So I want to get an agreement with John at that too. And I said, and then finally, John, the last thing that's guaranteed to get in the way is that you'll get busy and distracted. We all do as well. If you do miss an appointment, particularly in this first 6 to 10 weeks there as well, it's important that we make that up as soon as possible, preferably on the same day, but within that week as well, because missing an appointment can really set us back as well. So is that okay? So what I want to do at that stage, I just want to raise those issues with John, let him know that these might potentially get in the way. And it just makes for easier conversations where I can kind of refer back to it down the track. The next, what we want to do is we want to be really proactive in our adjustment visits. I want to be looking for opportunities to really educate in around those things. I want to be letting people know where symptoms fit into things. I want to let them know how they're progressing. I want to be constantly reminding them when they're coming into me and talking about how things are improving. I want to celebrate that as well. And I want to let them know where we are on the journey going forwards. I want to be looking out for signs that they're feeling frustrated. And in the early days, when I saw that frustration, I wanted to hide from it. Now I want to dive deeper into it. I want to say, John, you seem a little frustrated about the headaches. Tell me more about that. Well, I am, man. I've been coming here for 4 weeks and, they don't feel like they're any better. In which case I go, I get that's frustrating there too. Can you remember in the early days how long I told you it might take us to get on top of this? Yeah, 6 to 10 weeks. Hang in there, buddy. So I want to actually dive deep into those conversations. And so the more work that we can do in advance on our adjustment visits there, to be educating in that, we lay the foundations for reactivation. Now, there's a part that I missed to tell you. There's an important thing that our CAs do as well to create a culture for reactivation and follow-up phone calls that just happens on the report of findings checkout. And I want to go over the key things that happen there also for you, okay? So they're going through the process, checking out, they're going over our fees, making the appointments, and then one of the last things they will say there too is, John, if there's any reason that you can't make it to one of your appointments, can you please give us 24 hours notice so that we can reschedule that for you so we can keep you on track? And then they stop, look at John, and they wait for John to acknowledge with a yes. Then they say, John, if by some chance you miss an appointment there too and we don't hear from you, I'm going to give you a call to check and see that everything is okay. And then they'll wait for John to go yes. And then finally they say, John, if by some chance you can't give us 24 hours notice and or you miss an appointment, I want to let you know that there is a missed appointment fee. It's just $35. Is that okay? Yes. So we've got our 3 yeses from John up the front. He's acknowledged. He knows that we're creating a culture here that he needs to be calling us if he misses appointments. We're creating a culture that lets him know that if he does miss an appointment there too, that we will be following up. So then we go into our standard operating processes for how we handle kind of recalls and reactivations. And so again, if John misses an appointment, the front desk will follow up within 15 minutes of him missing that appointment. That is our goal. Do we always do it that quickly? Nope. But that is our goal within 15 minutes. And the front desk will just, again, if John answers the phone, it's just, hey, John, it's Mackenzie here from Life Chiropractic. We had you down for an 8:15. Is everything okay? And invariably, John goes, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I got distracted. One of the kids is unwell. We go, not a problem. Can we book you in for this afternoon? If we can, John, if we can keep you on your adjusting schedule there too, that way we'll keep, and again, there'll be a little bit of education about that. Now, if John doesn't answer the call, then Mackenzie will leave a message saying a very similar thing there too, and then she will follow up again with another 24 hours again. Now, if we haven't heard back from John within 48 hours from this, then that then gets passed on to the chiropractor to follow up with. Now, again, what we found at this stage is that getting the chiropractor engaged, now we have wonderful CAs in our practice, but there is an authority that comes from the chiropractor that doesn't come from the CA. That's just the way it is in our practice. Maybe it's different in your practice. Maybe your CAs have more authority than what mine do. And again, I would just reach out with a text message to John. I always found that of recent, text messages worked way better than phone calls because I was calling from my mobile phone. They didn't have my mobile phone necessarily in there. They thought it was probably some salesperson that didn't answer it. So I just sent a text message that would be something like this. Hey, John, Angus here from the Chiro. We had you in for a Monday appointment at 8:15. Mackenzie tried to reach out a couple of times. We haven't heard from you, buddy. I just want to check in. Is everything okay? Now, there is an intent behind this. I genuinely am interested and want to make sure everything is okay. We had our agreement up front. This is what happens. We haven't heard. We've reached out a couple of times. We haven't heard back. This is not some kind of script. What should sit underneath all of your reactivations and your recalls is genuine care for your patients. This is what makes it work so well is if it is just care, remember that old saying is that people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so at this stage, generally when it's a text message reached out from me, is that we can kind of sort that out really quickly. I can find out what's going on, what the frustration is. Invariably, as I told you before, they're just busy. And then I want to get John back onto his schedule as soon as possible. Now that's our reactivation. That's our recall process that we go through. Now, there's no specific scripts. Again, underneath all of it really is us being genuinely interested and caring of our patients. Now, I want to talk to you what many of you will have. Again, invariably, we'll have patients that will slip through there, and maybe it's been a month or so since we've reached out to them. And I was chatting with a chiropractor this morning, a community influencer member who has an entire list of recalls that he's going to start to reach out. And he said, Angus, what's the best way for me to go about these? I want to share how I go about these because, again, one of the things that we found that works best with these, again, is a text message. Again, we've sent letters, postcards, emails, all those things, telephone calls. But the thing that has really worked best for us, particularly over the last 5 years, is text messages. Just for the reasons I said beforehand, the open rate for text messages is by far better than anything else there too. Now, it's important. Again, you'll get best results with these if these are done by the chiropractor. So this chiropractor I was talking to this morning, his goal is to send out 5 of these per day. So whether there's a gap in between patients, his lunchtime, before or after work, is to send 5 text messages out. And I want to talk you through a little bit of the process and strategy I go through with this too, because there's a lot of thinking in behind this. It needs to be a personal message that goes out as opposed to a bulk one to everybody, because the personal touch is what makes a real difference with this, okay, for all of those reasons I mentioned beforehand. So if you were reaching out to John, then again, I would start text message off, might say something like this. Hey John, Angus here from the chiropractic office. You popped into my mind over the weekend and I wanted to just check in and see how you are. How are your headaches going? ? Now, if I can, I also want to add in something personal about John as well. So I might want to add something else in there like, are you back at golf yet? How's things at work? Or it could even be something like, about the football. Isn't it great that the Tigers are playing well? I want this to really look like, I was always looking for opportunities with my patients to remember really little things that might not have been important, but to remember things that might have been important to them. So if there was something about John, he loved golf, he loved the football, that I want to make a moment inside of that, or take the opportunity to mention that in my message there too, because that really matters. Now, the next step from here, we need to make sure that we handle this really well. And often what chiropractors do make a mistake with this is they try and go too quickly. So if John comes back to me, and invariably there's a few different options, but if John comes back and says, look, Angus, the headaches are still terrible. I'm not back playing golf again at the moment there too, and things are crazy at work. Now is not the time to say, would you like an appointment this Friday at 8 a.m? Okay. We need to actually be a human being at this stage. And the most appropriate thing to do at this stage is to respond with compassion and empathy. John, I'm so sorry to hear that, buddy. That must be so frustrating. Tell me more about that. What's been going on? Start to ask some questions in the morning, the afternoon, anything new or different going on. And then what I will invariably do is I'll have a few different back and forwards. It might be 3 or 4 messages back and forwards. And then the opportunity will open in there somewhere for me to say, would you like a hand with that? Would you like to come back in for an adjustment again? Can I schedule an appointment for you later on in the week? And if I take it slowly and I show care and I show compassion and as I act as a human being, then a high number of these people end up reactivating from there. So when somebody comes back and things aren't doing great for them, dive deeper into that, okay? Don't move back away from it. But if John comes back and says something like, man, things are doing great, my head's never felt better, I'm back at golf and everything is great from there as well, then the opportunity, depending on the circumstances, might be for me to say something like this. I'm thrilled that things are doing so great, John. That's perfect. I wonder if it might be worth a little checkup to make sure not only is the headache doing great, but to see how that posture, or whatever it is that we were talking about before, is that pelvis balanced the way that it ought to, to check in and see how things are going there too. So I can have the opportunity there to check back in. But many of those circumstances, you can just get a sense from the message that they're great and they don't need you at the moment, in which case celebrate with them and then reach out again in a few months' time. Or you might just say to them, hey man, so thrilled everything is doing great. We're here for you anytime that you want to check up. Love to see you sometime soon. Give my love to the bride and the kids. Something like that. I want to be just building relationships along the way, okay? Now, if you can have a process of reaching out to patients like that, where you're reaching out to 5 or 10 of those every day, a number of those, I'm not sure what the percentage would be, but probably 20% of them will end up reactivating, okay? And if you're finding out these are happening, if you're doing 5 a day because you've got a whole list of them, and 1 out of those 5, it's like finding a new patient every day. And there is literally this wealth inside your practice base of these people who are just waiting for you to reach out to them. Again, at the moment, a text message, being genuinely caring and inquisitive, is absolutely the best way that you can be doing it. Let's sum a few of these things up as we finish off this episode, okay? Reactivations is primarily, in my case there too, the way I think about it, is it's a sign of care and compassion for the patients. It is the thing that we do because we want our patients to get best results, first and foremost. Will it make a difference to the bottom line of your practice? Hell yes, absolutely. As I mentioned beforehand, it's great for kind of stability of income. Reactivated patients cost a lot less than new patients, and they're a lot easier for you to look after as well. But it needs to be built first on a culture in your practice that really is a spot where people will want to come back, where you're not making them wrong, where you're open to feedback for them, okay? Now, when you can do this, you'll understand that the number one reason that people drop out of care is they just got busy and they got distracted. Look for opportunities early on. Get proactive with your reactivation, because I dare say the same 3 reasons why people dropped out of care with me are the same reasons why people drop out of care with you. Look for opportunities in the report of findings where you're not forcing people into care, okay? Go back and listen to episode 216 where Martin takes you step by step through WHOOP, or borrow from a script I said beforehand by addressing those 3 issues before they come up. Find an opportunity in your report and your daily interactions and your adjustments there to be educating patients about those 3 reasons. Build some systems into your front desks as well so they can be having those conversations. And when possible, you, the chiropractor, should be involved in the reactivation process, because there's an authority and an expertise that comes from you that doesn't come from most CAs. Folks, that's it for this episode on reactivations. I do hope that it has been helpful for you. If you have more questions about this specifics, you know how to reach out to me either on the socials or you can send me an email. I'd love to help you with this stuff. Thanks for all you do. Keep saving lives. See you back here real soon. Bye. If you've enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out my Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work with you to help you apply it, implement it, and systemize it. The Community Influencer Group Coaching Program is designed to help you increase your practice income, impact, and enjoyment. Join me over at anguspyke.com/join. That's anguspyke.com/join. I'd love to see you there.